Good evening and many thanks to Professor Scott for introducing me. Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, dear guests, it's my great pleasure to be here in Firenze, in Florence, in Italy. First of all, my sincere apologies for being late. We came on time, but we were escorted to another place, and then it took us a while to make a round, which lasted more than 15 minutes to find the right place and entrance here. But once again, I'm very glad to be here, even more so because, as I have heard, students from Slovakia are joining us remotely via online connection. I'm very glad because it is part of our efforts within the conference on future of European Union to engage with public, especially with younger generation. And I've heard there are 4 universities, 2 of them from capital city of Bratislava and 2 other universities from Slovakia, and therefore I'm looking forward to a lively discussion. I was invited to speak about Central European view and Central European perspective of European Union. Nevertheless, I will disappoint you right at the outset, because there is nothing like one consolidated representative perspective coming from Central Europe. You will hear me speak, therefore, rather about Slovak perspective. Nevertheless, Slovakia is part of Central Europe, but you have several perspectives coming from Central Europe, and I'm glad that I'm representing the Slovak one, which I can tell you is a very pro-European and forward-looking, and we trust the European Union as a unique project, and we are very supportive of it. Let me start by sharing with you a few thoughts and remarks on state of play, basically trying to identify where we are finding ourselves in European Union at this moment as we speak. And I can indeed speak endlessly about that, because I was privileged to have the experience throughout my professional career as diplomat and know and learn a lot about European Union from inside, how it works. So I experienced ups and downs. I experienced when I was permanent representative to the EU in Brussels since 2009, all major crises European Union has been going through over the recent decade, if I may recall that. And indeed, this was when looking in a retrospective, it seems to be a vicious circle of crisis. They've been chasing us, literally, in European Union. It all started with financial crisis and economic crisis in 2008, and later 2009. It has deepened into Euro crisis, where I want to remember as Euro almost collapsed over those years. We've been looking into the abyss of a collapse of this major project of European Union, namely common currency. When we thought this was over, because we've done a major progress on how to strengthen Eurozone, when we thought it was over, then Russian aggression came against Ukraine. We've been dealing with that. We unfortunately have not found a resolution to that conflict yet. But then, migration crisis, which has created deep dividing lines within European Union, and yet we don't have a solution for that problem as well. And then but right at the outset of Slovak presidency, the first one historically in 2015, in the second half, 2016, I remember the moment when the UK citizens voted for the Brexit. So it seems an endless array of crises, once again, the European Union is facing. I'm mentioning that because when talking about state of play within the European Union, when contemplating and thinking about its future, we cannot ignore that we have major leftovers from this decade of crisis, and we need to deal with them. In addition to all of those that I have mentioned, we are now finding ourselves still amid of a pandemia, of something which many years ago would be, like science fiction. We are finding ourselves in the position that we are wearing masks in Slovakia today, and tomorrow we will have to make another restrictive decisions and measures that we need to introduce while we are confronted with still rising number of those who are infected. So imagine just 1.5 years ago, back then it looked like unthinkable that we still we'll have to be wearing masks, and barely we can predict when they will come, when we come back to normalcy, if I may say so. So this all together, once again, creates an atmosphere of mistrust towards European Union, partly because there are many in the European Union who are playing with that and are trying to say that the European Union has not been able to deal with those issues from the previous period, nor is the European Union able to deal with pandemic. And I can come back to it because I am the one who says that it is simply not truth. I see, as I said, when going beyond this state of play description, I see two groups of problems the EU is facing. The one is internal structural challenges. I see three of them, and it's not a complete list of the structural challenges. The first one I've mentioned: unfinished business, a lot of leftovers. Number two, increasing vulnerability. One of the lessons learned from the pandemic is the need to improve EU's resilience. It has many facets: health sector, economic resilience, climate and disinformation. All this makes us vulnerable. This is the point that I'm making. And thirdly, I'm not certain whether we can call it structural challenge, but it is becoming, unfortunately, bigger and bigger problem. And Professor Scott, she mentioned me as the one who keeps on talking about that. That's what I have here, rule of law crisis. I don't think it's a real crisis. Nevertheless, one cannot ignore that all of a sudden we are confronted within the European Union with a bizarre situation that rule of law becomes a contentious issue. And that's very bad, because European Union, professor of law, all of you are dealing with European Union as a community of law, because European Union as such is the rule of law. I am referring to it, and I am explaining to my citizens, to students, that without rule of law, there will be nothing in European Union. It's not only a transcendental philosophical issue. It's a question of prosperity. I keep on saying or telling people that, can there be security for investors unless you have independent judiciary? Can there be democratic competition within the country without independent media? It cannot. So everything that we have achieved so far, it's thanks to rule of law. And therefore, once again, we should not now engage in deepening the conflict over rule of law within European Union. It must be resolved. And once again, there is no need to question this very principle on which European Union has been built. Second, external challenges. Europe has been engaged in internal crisis management. So therefore, we've been looking into our own European business. Definitely, but the world has not stopped, or the developments are very dynamic around the world. Global superpower competition is back. We are we are confronted with that, and we cannot ignore that, you know, there is a geopolitical shift underway from the transatlantic area towards Indo-Pacific area, where other major players are trying to dominate. EU needs to ask what it has to offer. We have our strength. We can credibly claim economic or climate leadership at global level. Nevertheless, we've seen that in Glasgow at COP26 as well. You know, if I mean, this is the point about leadership, and here we can ask a question: if no one is following you, then whom are you leading? But I am the one who says that at COP26, I'm speaking about climate, of course, more could have been achieved, but realistically, we are where we are. The 1.5 goal was saved. At the end, there was a setback regarding coal, and so not outphasing, the phasing down. Those are realities we are all facing within in the world. Nevertheless, we should not give up on our ambition to remain a leader, because I believe climate is not only climate change and what we do about that. It's not only how to deal with climate, but it's a transformative effort on our side. In addition to what I have said, and even more so in connection with our global ambitions as a foreign policy player, I mean, European Union, I want to stress how important it is from my perspective to see what's going on in our neighborhood. And I'm mentioning that because you can barely be a respected foreign policy player and actor unless you are able to ensure that there is stability in your respective neighborhood. I've mentioned Ukraine, which is a directly neighboring country in Slovakia, and what's going on there simply is not acceptable for us. Aggression in 2014, when we thought after 1989 it is impossible that one country will just take part of a territory of another sovereign country, but the conflict continues in Ukraine, and we see tension rising along the border of Ukraine with Russia. When you look to the south, we are in Italy, definitely in the northern part of Africa. If you look at Middle East, which I consider our neighborhood as well. So this is something where the European Union not only can deliver, but we must deliver. We must have more influence in those parts of our neighborhood. And two, I cannot bypass the need to deal with responsibly and accordingly with the enlargement process, because enlargement remains for us, I think, the most effective leverage, the most effective transformative instrument at our hand when we deal with countries from the Western Balkans. I'm very often there, I'm talking to the leaders of those countries which are negotiating their membership, and I can tell you very often they are, what kind of word should I use? There is this sort of disillusion on their side, because they believe that they are delivering. Look at North Macedonia and Albania. Commission has said it very clearly that they fulfilled all necessary conditions to open factual negotiations with them, and still there is a blockade on the side of the member states. So neighborhood, I mean, the global picture, we should deliver more than we are proclaiming. Then the neighborhood and instability, and very important enlargement policy that has to remain a credible policy on our side. And now Slovak perspective, because that was sort of my look at where we are in European Union, internal challenges, external. How do we go about that? When it comes to internal challenges, I think the first most important, most urgent and pertinent issue is how to deal with the consequence of pandemic. Because whatever we tell to our people about European Union, acting or not acting globally, whatever, people at this moment in Slovakia, I hope students will agree with me from Slovakia, people look at, you know, how we get out of pandemic, how we deal with the negative economic consequences. And here I want to say on behalf of my country that we are happy that we managed to mobilize political energy and to set up an economic response to that via new generation, next generation EU, and basically the funds that should compensate the losses and yet at the same time become a transformative instrument for our countries. In other words, to carry out very painful reforms that we need anyway, irrespective of pandemic. Climate, I've mentioned that. Definitely always more can be done. I think it's good that EU remains, or that EU keeps on its ambition to become a leader. On that I agree that there is no planet B, and therefore there is no moment B. We have to act now when it comes to how to save our planet. Therefore, I want to mention that we support, although it's quite tricky and controversial, that the entire new or next generation or EU budget, if you want, is so much focused on climate. 43% of funds committed within next generation is directed to climate, and we support that. This is all about climate. Then on external challenges and what I've said about our ambition to be a more influential global player, we have started more than a year ago a discussion within the European Union about strategic compass. Strategic compass should be both an agreement amongst us what level of ambition we have as European Union when it comes to defense and security, and of course we should have clarity about the threat that we are facing, because you can barely act unless you read identically the threats and challenges that we are facing. So we support that process very much, and we believe it's not a bureaucratic exercise, but rather a political effort. And at the end of the day, once again, we should be better prepared for the threats and be able to face them more effectively. And finally, I've said that already. Conference on the future of Europe. I'm strong champion, strong proponent of that idea of this conference about future of Europe. You know why? Because I remember in 2016, right after Brexit, when we all stood in a shock after there was no coming from United Kingdom. And back then, I remember, as it's already more than 5 years have passed since, but already in 2016, we promised to our citizens, okay, now wait a minute, we realize that this is a major setback for the entire European project when one country, such an important country like United Kingdom, is leaving. And therefore, we want to do something about it. We have to take a reflection. And here, I have to tell you that I am disappointed a little bit about the, how should I say it, low intensity of the discussion. This time, and this part I support, this time we wanted to take a different way, to more listen to citizens, what they believe or what they expect should be done in order to restore trust to the European Union. What changes, including possibly changes of European law if needed. Yeah. But debate does not exist too much. Maybe it does, but it's not a political major. It is not a major political debate that would somehow come up and through media into our public and back to our politics. And I am confident, however, that during French presidency we will be able to tell to our people what we want to do with this project, because otherwise it's just a question of time when the next crisis comes and we again will be facing, you know, existential questions about European Union. But we owe it to our own citizens. Now we are listening to them, but it's very difficult to engage in a real discussion because it's COVID, and it's COVID. But we will not give up on that ambition. Now, last but not least, you know, I spoke about climate. I spoke about Western Balkans. I spoke about, you know, economic recovery. I spoke about resilience. The usual speak in European Union. Nevertheless, the last point that I wanted to make is about values and roots, and I started with that, with the reference to rule of law. But I want to close with a message I'd like to share with you, and that's that the Union is founded on the values of respect for human dignity, freedom, democracy, equality, the rule of law, and respect for human rights. And this is not a pure statement of fact, but a quote. Once again, this is not something that I have discovered at this moment. This is a quote from Article 2 of the Treaty of European Union, which all member states subscribe to. And as you see, the internal compass has been there for decades. We do not have to start Europe's soul searching from scratch, because the foundations of the European project are valid. So we should resist temptation of those who are trying, okay, let's dissolve the European Union and start to build it again from scratch. No. We rather should fill with content what the founding fathers of European Union have enshrined in the basic law of European Union. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, this is it basically what I wanted to say. Once again, I'm representing small Central European country. We've joined European Union in 2004. I had the privilege to be there from moment one, and I can tell you, I'm not the one who every day wakes up and you know, I'm listening the Beethoven's Ninth Symphony and I'm singing that, or standing while my kids would be raising the Europe's flag. I'm very critical of European Union, but I believe you have two groups, two schools of thoughts. People are those who are not critical, but rather populistically making European Union responsible for everything which doesn't work, while on national level, we are always the best ones. And I'm saying on behalf of Slovakia in 2004 when we joined, that was the beginning of an unprecedented successful story of my country as a member of European Union, because I can compare where we were in 1989, I can compare where we were when we joined European Union in 2004 and where we are, you know, a few years later. Therefore, I dare say that European Union is not a perfect union, by far not. European Union does not have any immunity against criticism, but I wish we all would approach the assessment of what needs to be done, what doesn't work, what should be remedied from a constructive point of view, to see realities as they are. No, we are not the ones who want to create United States of Europe. I think it's off the table. I'm almost laughing when somebody is threatening with that. This is not a threat to Europe. The threat to Europe is our inability, basically, within the European Union to fulfill what we have committed ourselves to. So there is just a lack of action on our side, and let us use this unprecedented and difficult period. The mankind, in fact, is going through with the pandemic for serious thinking about how we get out of it. But from the perspective of my country, small country, there is no better thing like trying to get and agree on common European solutions. And with these words, I want to thank you, thank this institute, EUI, and all of you who are committed, critical Europeans. And I thank you for giving me this opportunity, and especially the Slovak students that have been with us. Thank you very much.